Namaskar and welcome to this session called Connected Threats, where we shall discuss modern security challenges. In our world today, threats are evolving faster than nations can improvise their security frameworks. At the same time, alliances are shifting and national priorities are changing. So there are many moving parts. How do you formulate a strategy to secure your country? To discuss this and more, we have with us Dr. Athanasios Ntokos, the National Security Advisor of Greece. Dr. Ntokos, welcome to the Ideas Pod.
Pleasure to be here.
How are you doing today?
It was a full day, very useful, very informative.
And as we've been talking at the Raisina Dialogue with different sessions, different conversations, there have been developments across the world, including a phone call between President Trump and President Putin. The situation in Ukraine is also evolving. There have been attacks on the ground. This is a war that has been on for more than 3 years. It is a geopolitical battle more than a territorial battle. As the National Security Advisor of Greece, what is your biggest takeaway from how the situation has evolved?
Well, the interesting thing about Ukraine is that it is both an old type of war and a new type of war. So you have the physical dimension, two armies fighting each other. Some of the tactics remind us of the Second World War or even First World War, but then you have all that new technology being used by both sides, drones, information coming from satellites. At the same time, you have an information warfare taking place between Russia on the one hand and Ukraine and its allies on the other. So it's a very interesting conflict. We think that this is going to be the shape of future warfare.
And in political terms, there are new wildcards. Can Europe still rely on American security with the way the statements have come from Washington, D.C.?
I guess that's the big question now. And we are trying to understand what is the thinking of the new American administration. Of course, on the European side, we'll keep trying to work with Washington as much as we can. But at the same time, we need to be preparing ourselves. So the thinking now in Brussels and major European capitals is that we need to do more about European strategic autonomy, invest more in defense. Now, my country has been spending at least 3% for many years for a number of geopolitical reasons, but the average of European countries is well below 1.5, and this is definitely not enough. So the decision has been made that both individual European countries, but also the EU as a whole, will be spending more on defense and also strengthening our strategic autonomy. The focus is not only defense. It's about security, it's about resilience, it's about dealing with new threats.
Where does that leave NATO?
NATO, at least the European thinking, is that NATO is still the most important military alliance, a cornerstone of European security, and we'll try to keep it strong and useful for as long as we can. Hopefully, the same thinking will be adopted by Washington.
The Americans are talking about playing ice hockey with the Russians now. Can NATO operate as a cohesive force?
Well, look, NATO has adapted to many changes since the end of the Cold War. NATO is a very flexible and adaptive organization, so it can absorb various shocks. Now, again, let's not try to predict what will happen over the next few days and weeks because developments may surprise us. But I think there is still a majority in Washington that believes in the value of NATO, of keeping NATO strong and alive.
But this is a Washington that is claiming Canada. This is a Washington that is also claiming Greenland. So when you engage with your American counterparts, what do you tell them?
And Panama.
Yes, Panama Canal.
Again, it's in the early phases of a new administration. I think we should give them more time.
Okay. As you mentioned, data, information and intelligence have become vital for national security. And what complicates this picture is the presence of private players like Starlink, which can impact the way wars are being fought. And this is a very powerful private player. Does that worry you, the growing influence of these non-state actors?
It's not something new because non-state actors have been important players for many years. But now having high-tech corporations and even individuals having so much power, this is a new element, and we need to assess that. It's complicating an already complicated and very complex security environment. One of the problems is that we still have the physical dimension, physical space, and all the conventional threats. And at the same time, we also have digital space and all kind of digital and cyber threats. So this is a very complicated security environment. And what you just mentioned, high-tech companies and individuals having too much power, this is further complicating the situation. We need to think how to manage that.
I'll add another element to this mix, and that is trade. You mentioned digital security. I know that Greece has issued warnings regarding TikTok and DeepSeek, but China is also a very important trading partner of your country. How do you balance the two, and will you have to pick one of the two, economy or security?
Well, China has a significant presence in Greece in the port of Piraeus, which is Greece's largest port. Now, unfortunately, when we were forced to privatize the port of Piraeus about 15 years ago, the Chinese were the only one that showed up. But now we have a situation which we need to manage. So we made clear to our Chinese friends that we would not like to see any new investment in critical infrastructure. And we kept China out of our 5G system. And we are monitoring what is happening in the port of Piraeus, because we believe in the motto, trust but verify. So China is an important country, politically and economically, but there is a framework of relations set by both the EU and NATO, and Greece is abiding by that.
So you're saying that giving a majority stake to the Chinese in the port was a mistake?
Well, if we had the option of choosing a European or American company, I suspect that we would have made that choice.
I suppose that's an argument that a lot of countries can make, that end up as victims of China's debt trap diplomacy, that they have clear developmental goals and needs, and those needs are not being met by the global financial infrastructure. So the only people who show up are the Chinese, who give them loans, and those loans are taken, and then it follows the same pattern.
What you said applies to a number of countries, but I want to be fair with China. They have made a significant investment in the port of Piraeus, and this has been a success story both for China but also for Greece, because now the port of Piraeus is probably the largest port of the Mediterranean. So in our case, the debt trap doesn't apply. It has been a successful partnership for both sides.
Let's also focus on internal security challenges. And in Greece, cyber attacks and terror attacks are on top of the list. In Europe in general, we're witnessing more incidents of car ramming and stabbing. And a lot of this is being attributed to radicalization. Do you agree with this assessment, and how do you then curb it?
Well, Greece has been fortunate not to suffer from radicalization incidents, but this does not make us immune. We're probably a few years behind our European partners, so we're looking very carefully at their experience to see how we can prevent such incidents. But the threat is there, and of course social media, the internet can be used to influence radicalization efforts by various actors. So we're taking this very seriously.
In the larger context, immigration has become a political and divisive issue, and in some cases it is fueled by xenophobia, but there is no denying the fact that it also has evolved as a non-conventional challenge or threat to national security. So how do nations address it? Well,
different countries have adapted, have used different methods. In our case, weaponization of migration has been observed by one of our neighbours, and we are one of the entry points to the EU. So a significant number of people are arriving in Greece and try to get to other European countries. And this is causing a problem because of the numbers, but also because what you usually get is single young men without a family. They have difficulties integrating, adapting. They are a little more prone to criminal acts than the average person. So this is slowly becoming a problem, and there is also a rise of the far right in many European countries trying to exploit that phenomenon for electoral gains, and they have been successful in many cases, like Germany, for example, or France. So this is a problem. What we need in the European Union is a common asylum and migration policy, so that there is burden sharing among various European countries. Efforts have been moderately successful so far, but there is still things that we need to do at the European level.
All the points that you mentioned are the realities of our world. And we also see ships capsizing and lives being lost. Does Europe appreciate what these migrants are fleeing and the fact that a lot of them may be looking at a safer, better life in a different continent, and the wars that the world does not care to focus on, unlike Ukraine or Israel?
I think many Europeans do, because just to give the example of Greece, we used to have many of our compatriots live in Greece in the past because of poverty. Many of them went to the US, to Canada, to Australia, or other European countries. So do understand what it means to leave your home, because there's violence, there's climate change, there's poverty. So, I think the humanitarian or the human dimension is well appreciated. But then once the numbers become too high, then there is a backlash.
I can imagine. India and Greece are working closely together to boost ties in various areas, space, defense, technology. How are your conversations with your partners in India sort of playing out, and what specifically are you focusing on at the moment?
Well, both sides are trying to build a strategic partnership. The relations are excellent. We're working in various fields. You mentioned some of them. There's also a good personal relationship between our two prime ministers. And perhaps the most iconic project on which Greece and India are trying to cooperate is IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. So India thinks, and of course Greece agrees, that we are, because of geography, one of the entry points to the EU. So we're working together to make this project happen. And there is also, I must add, significant interest of Indian companies to invest in Greece, and a number of Greek companies are looking into the Indian market. So I think the prospects are very positive.
Final question. We had a long discussion on IMEC, and one of the participants was from Greece, interestingly, and they made some good points. But the point I want to ask you, the question I want to ask you is this, that given the security environment in West Asia at the moment, and how we do not see an immediate resolution to the conflict, and another one in the Red Sea also brewing, do you think IMEC as an idea will translate into an actual project anytime soon?
Well, both Greece and India are concerned about what is happening, both with Israel and Palestine, but also in the Red Sea, where we're actually cooperating. The Greek and the Indian Navy are patrolling in the same region, so there is cooperation at this level as well. Well, as long as there is significant conflict, of course, projects like IMEC will be more difficult to implement. But this is a long-range project. It will take years for the whole corridor to be built and operate. So I think there is time, and one has to be optimistic that by that time, there will be not only a ceasefire, but perhaps a more permanent solution in problems in West Asia.
Right. Dr. Ntokos, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.